Hi guys, how you doing? This is Tom Blodgett from Jende Industries, and today I want to switch things up a little bit. I want to give an update on the COVID-19 situation here. As many of you know, I actually live in Taiwan, and I've been here for about 20 years. Things are usually different here in Asia to begin with, and nowadays with the COVID-19 in Taiwan, it's very different. So I wanted to give my perspective of what's going on here in Taiwan. I saw my friend Eric, who's living in Panama. He did a video, and so it sort of inspired me because of what's really going on in each country, kind of thing, of what's it really like. And this is not to cause controversy or anything like that. I'm just gonna kind of go through a list of what really is going on in terms of officialness. I'm not gonna give too many political comments or whatever. Well, let's just begin. As of this video, it is the 16th of May, 2020. There have been about officially 440 cases of COVID-19 in Taiwan, about 387 people recovered, and 7 deaths. I think there's an 8th death that might have been just there, but 7 or 8 as of this video. So in general, things are doing pretty good. A population of 22 or so million people, and 440 people have been infected, of which the majority of them have recovered. So really good, really positive. I think the only other country that has such low numbers is what I joke with people is North Korea, because they've got none and nobody died and they don't have any symptoms at all. So Taiwan has got this under control, and it's a story that you're seeing a lot of stuff about W.H.O and all the politics and stuff like that. But the true success story behind Taiwan is kind of what I want to highlight here. And its reality is that it's from SARS in 2003. And I was here for that, and that was scary. This is as scary, if not a little scarier. I don't feel, well, this is not as scary in Taiwan, to be honest. Everyone's nervous, but it's not the same feeling that I had in 2003. 2003 was very much a lot more fear. Not because there was things that they couldn't do, they didn't have the same technology. They didn't have the order that they have now. And the way they did it, they just locked it down fast and hard, and they didn't have to do that to the people. And that's one of the key things I think the takeaway is here. So I'm going to start off with a timeline, and I'm going to interject some of my experiences in there. So the first thing is December 31st is the first day I think Wuhan actually shut down, I think, on that day. So this is where Taiwan began screening passengers from Wuhan officially. So at the airport, and basically all of China they expanded to. So on the December 31, 2019, they were already starting to screen right when things were just about getting a little bit before the height in Wuhan, before they started really locking stuff down. And then fast forward to January 20th, Taiwan sets up their Central Emergency Command Center, the CECC. And this is basically the control center for the epidemic. They had set this up after SARS in 2003. So they literally had a place in place already for something like this because of the last time in 2003. So this was sitting there for 17 years, getting dusty until, boom, they needed it. And it was there, and they just opened the doors and it was ready to go. So on January 21st was the first official case of a passenger arriving from Wuhan to Taiwan, and they were tested positive. And it was actually 2 days. So January 23rd is when Wuhan got locked down. That was before Chinese New Year. So I believe in part of those flights, one of the people that actually was infected, one of the earliest cases, if not this person, I'm not sure, actually went to a dance club that is literally, I showed a few people from my window. I can see it from a shop window. It's catty corner across the street, probably about 200 yards it's on the next street corner. They were at that dance club hall. I don't frequent that place, so I'm not really too worried, but it was really close to home, and like one of the first cases too, so it was kind of like, this is going to be really terrible. But they got the guy. He actually had to pay a fine. I think he actually paid the full fine of like $15,000 US because he lied and he didn't tell them that he had symptoms or anything like that, and then he was like one of the earliest cases. And so Taiwan, again, really fast, really hard. It made the news. By January 26th, Taiwan pretty much stopped all flights from Hebei province and ultimately from China. On February 3rd, the first group of Taiwanese people were evacuated from China, about 247 people. So that was the first evacuation in terms of getting them out of China, and because China was shutting down flights as well at that point and starting to lock down Wuhan. February 6th was the beginning of the mask rationing. Now, all the stuff going on in the U.S. about masks, no masks, are they effective or not? Let me tell you, they're effective, okay? Logic tells you if it stops something from getting passed, it also stops you from getting it. So you double that down, just make good sense. But that's about as political as I'm going to get about it. It works for a reason. So wear them if you can. And so what they did first was, one, and this is where, again, not being political, but where historically already you look at America as an example, prime example of what went wrong. Here's what went wrong where Taiwan said, before it even started, this is what they said. First, masks. You can't hoard them. Okay? First thing. No toilet paper problems here. So can't hoard, right? You can't do that. They won't let you. Second, you can't gouge the price for a mask. Government locked down on that. Said nope. And they immediately went to rationing. Now, I know Taiwan already had a store of masks and PPE and all that stuff because of SARS. So they had something in place already. So they already had a selection of masks that they could have for this kind of situation, but they immediately knew they were going to need more. So they put a halt on everybody and said you can only get two or 2 or 3 a week, and at a set time, and you had to go to a certain place to get them, but you couldn't get screwed on the price. So the price went up a little bit, but it didn't break the bank, and nobody could go any higher. Also, one of the things they put into place, again, the CDC, CECC, was running the show. The president wasn't involved. She is, of course, driving the boat, but the CECC had like a lot of say. And every night they went on TV and they gave an update of what was going on that day. And it was anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour of what they were doing. So a lot of places are similarly doing that. They're giving these updates with the sign language and everything. Taiwan was doing that from like day one, every day. So with the masks again, and then they stopped the shaming. So if anybody had the virus or was found to have it or test positive, they gave male or female and the age and whether or not they were a Taiwan national or not. That's as far as it went. So shortly after that, as a comment here, public places were places where there were a lot of people. They started just self-doing this in a way. It wasn't really said you had to wear a mask at that point, but people started wearing masks, and it's very common in Asia to wear a mask. I wear one when I drive my scooter because the air is bad and stuff like that. So it's nothing new. With that, the doctor's offices first. Again, they had a protocol already in place. So if you were going to get sick, you knew which hospital you were supposed to go to. The hospitals already knew where to go. In SARS, they didn't really have that broken down as much. It was like, at first they started taking all the patients, and then they realized they needed to move them to like a facility. So this time around, it was set up. Boom. You got these symptoms, you got put on a bus or something, and you had to go to that hospital. And to get into the hospital was also a thing. They had the big data going. They checked the cards. They knew that I had traveled and my insurance card, and the hospital saw that. So they were sharing data amongst these big places. Now, again, questions about political stuff, correctness and whatnot, but that aside, they were doing this and monitoring to make sure that it was truthful, that you hadn't traveled in the last 14 days and things like that. So you were allowed into the hospital, but you had to wear a mask, you had to get your temperature taken, and you had to sanitize your hands. And on the way out, they sanitized my hands again at the hospital. So that was fast. And places like, clinics started wearing masks right away and having outdoors to screen you before you went into the clinic. Just a regular clinic. It wasn't about, anything else. It could be just for pediatrician or whatever. And then it expanded to like other places like in banks and things of that nature. So, but it wasn't forced. It was just, everyone just sort of went with it. It wasn't a big deal. So February 11th, travel alerts expanded. This is where people coming from other Asian countries like Hong Kong, where they were getting hit, Singapore and Thailand, they said don't go there, and they were starting to screen and they were starting to check to see if they needed to quarantine people. I had friends that went to Vietnam, and they transferred through Hong Kong to come back, and they were put on a 14-day self-assessment. So they were told to watch your stuff. They weren't being quarantined, but they were told to watch their temperature. If any symptoms show up, go and call and hit the doctor and do what you got to do. they were okay after that. After 2 weeks, nothing came out of that. So on February 16th, 2020 was the first COVID-related death in Taiwan. So February 21st was the big, I remember seeing this on TV, it was like a huge deal. The Diamond Princess came in as a cruise ship. And I think they were getting bounced around. You saw that in the beginning there was several cruise ships of different countries. There was one in Japan, and then so this one was in Taiwan, northern Taiwan. And they got sort of held off. They couldn't come in until they were all tested. And of course, there were a bunch of people that had the virus that were, it was an outbreak on the ship. So that was like the first influx of real patients. And then, so it's not a domestic grown, it was sort of imported with people. So that was that. And that was, it lasted a little while, but then they were all tested. They were tested several times. And when it was clear that it was good to go, the CECC guy, Mr. Chen, he was there and he said, okay, you're good to go. Those that weren't, and everyone else went off to a quarantine location. February 25th, this is, I believe, this is where now they're doing legislation to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. That's when Chinese New Year was happening. And what they did because of this as well is they shut down the schools for an extra 2 weeks. So they went from February until March. So they're supposed to go back at the end of February, and they extended it until March. So it was another 2 week, I believe, break. And from there, what happened was if a student got sick, so all schools went back, all colleges went back. Colleges were a little bit later, but they all went back. And so the schools, if there was one student that was sick or positive, they shut that school down only. And so they really just jumped on it. Every time it was whack-a-mole. When one popped up, boom, CECC just jumped in and they just got it, sealed it up, put a dome on it, and then waited for the next one to pop up. And then if the school got there, then boom, they'd shut down the school for a couple of weeks and then test again. So very few schools actually got shut down, a handful. I don't know how many, to be honest, but not many at all. So kudos to that, because it didn't, again, every time that it popped its head up, the COVID-19 popped its head up, the CECC was there to just, slam it down. And again, effectively. So, but again, people were very nervous. At this point, everyone's wearing masks. They're checking temperatures to go. Even to the post office, you couldn't go in without a mask at sometimes. So buildings, people are social distancing. They started putting lines at checkouts at 7-Eleven and stuff like that, convenience stores, everywhere. And a place that's really kind of very densely packed. Suddenly they found space to space people out. So it's kind of weird, to be honest, when you used to get pushed around at the market by everybody, but suddenly there was like a little bit of gap between people. So they really took it seriously here in Taiwan. And again, people were suspicious of everyone else because nobody wanted to get the virus. If you sneezed, it was sort of like a look, and then you could joke a little bit, but not too much about, there's the COVID-19. But you really just didn't fool around about it. So, all right, fast forward to March. And this is interesting for me because in March, it still was looking okay. Like Asia, all these diseases were supposed to be in Asia. They were never supposed to get to the West because historically they just trickle out a little bit, but it basically focuses in Asia. So this was different, obviously. Now, I actually, in March, I took a trip. I went to the States for a week and some business and some family. On the plane, I wore a mask. I took the high-speed rail up to Taipei, and we wore masks all the way up. We wore masks in the airport, wore masks on the plane. We sanitized our hands several times. Everyone on that plane, and this is early March, so this is March 7th or so. Everyone on that plane, I'd say about 90 to 95% of the people on the plane were wearing masks. You had some people wearing goggles and gloves. You had a few people wearing raincoats and maybe a little overboard, but definitely on the safe side of crazy. And the whole flight was that way, and everyone was cool about it. And it was a pretty packed flight. We got to the States, and of course, people were looking at us funny, like, why y'all wearing masks, in the airport. By the time we left on the 17th of March, Denver had closed up its bars and restaurants at 10 o'clock that night, and we left the next day, the next morning. So that's when it sort of really started hitting the fan in the U.S. And when we got on the plane, we were told that we were going to be forced quarantined when we arrived back in Taiwan. And I thought maybe we could squeeze by and just get the 14 days of just self-assessment. But no, when we arrived, we were forced quarantined. So I was able to go home because I reside here. I had to take a taxi, a 3.5 hour taxi drive, but it was subsidized. It was a set price, and yeah, it was a little inconvenient, but got home and was locked into my house for 14 days, and they checked. They called every day at different times. My daughter, who went with us to the States, she missed one of the calls because her phone was in the other room and she didn't hear it. Within 10 minutes, the cops were there. Literally 10 minutes. I told her, check her phone. What time did they call? And I looked at the clock. It was 10 minutes. I shut my phone off one night to sleep, and they came just at 12:30 after midnight. I shut it down like 11:40, and they came by 12:30. So another 40 minutes, they were out the door, and they were kind of pissed. And I felt bad about that because I didn't really want to cause any trouble. So, but for 14 days, I was locked in my house, and there was a subsidy for that, to be honest. And it's not making money, it's not worth the money, but there's a little something there to at least say, thanks for participating. Fast forward now to March 18th is when I arrived back. And the reason they forced us to quarantine is because there was a huge spike. Not huge now by comparison to other countries that are getting huge spikes. And there was more people that were coming back from traveling that were being the cases that were now developing into positive cases. So it still wasn't amongst the population that hadn't traveled. There was all this imported stuff. So they said, you know what? Everybody, you're quarantined. If you want to transfer through, get the hell out. But basically, you're in here, you're forced to quarantine. So we were amongst the first flight to have that happen to. March 19th was the official day that they really said 14 days. 24th was the entry of travelers en route to another country. So they stopped the transferring flights because they didn't want to help perpetuate the problem of it going somewhere else. If you were transferring in Taiwan, they weren't going to let you transfer anymore. So they shut down those flights. That was on the 24th. So March 30th was 300 cases with 306 to 5 fatalities. And yeah. So again, it was hitting like a number that was starting to get to a point where it could be bad. So then on April 1st, so President Tsai Ing-wen says they're going to donate surgical masks. So keep in mind, April 1st, was the first day that the president really got in and weighed in on this. Now, of course, she's knows what's going on every day, but the mask rationing was February 6th, so almost a month that Taiwan was saving masks or prioritizing their masks for first responders and doctors and things of that nature to have the masks at their disposal, and people were getting surgical masks. So this is where the president finally steps in and makes an announcement that says we're here to help. We ramped up. In that time, they were ramping up. In January, they started ramping up the mask production. So this was a time where it came to fruition, and they were ready to send a cargo plane full of masks. So they did that. Then on April 1st as well, masks became mandatory. So this is the first time that really masks became mandatory in mass transit, anywhere in public. So if you're going to be outside, still no lockdowns, no shutting anything. Everything was open. It was just hypervigilance, and people were being very careful. But this is the first official day, April 1st, saying wear masks if you're out in public or you're in a densely populated place. So in the beginning, April 2nd, the government, of course, put in a new about $2 billion package for more legislation again. April 3rd, the global cases passed 1 million global. So at that point, Taiwan was still at the 100 plus mark. So April 4th, the first national alert is issued here. April 9th, that's when they closed all the bars. And not the bars, but they closed the clubs. So again, like that dance hall and stuff like that, and clubs, nightclubs, things of that nature where there's a lot of people there. So they really shut down a bit of the nightlife, including some of the night markets and stuff like that were kind of just ramped down. So then April 18th, Taiwan had hit zero a couple of days in a row. So April 18th, the military shows up, one of the Navy ships, and they ended up with 37 people. I got an alert on my phone, and they put a map. They literally gave us like a Google map with all the places that the Navy guys had been throughout the island. And it seemed like they had gone everywhere. But all those places, they knew where they had went, they knew the timeline. All those places shut down for several days, were sanitized. They collected, I think they had 600 some odd people that they talked to throughout the island. And don't forget, this is only 30 some odd people, and they collected 600 people, and I believe they quarantined either 400 of them or 200 of them. I forget which one it was. I haven't looked that up, but they quarantined several just for safety measures. And of that, I don't believe anybody actually got the infected out of that. So it was really good. So that was a black eye right there, but still 30 cases from a singular source. It's still a big whack-a-mole, and that was a big mole, and they whacked it, you know. So we're getting Italian there. So again, and that ship had been overseas on a humanitarian mission, and so that's where they caught it. And so anyway, so April 19th, that pushed Taiwan over the 400 mark right there. April 27th is the first time that they'd actually like eased up on the masks and stuff. So not eased up wearing them, but they were relaxing on how you can get them now. They had enough. They said, hey, now you want to donate some of your extra masks, now's the time. So they started that. Now in May, early May, May 1st, there were no new cases for 6 days. 6 days with 0 in Taiwan on May 1st. They had a couple more on May 3rd. I think there were 5 or 4. So it brought us up to 436. Then more travel restrictions are relaxed on May 6th. Now get this, on May 8th. May 8th, they had a baseball game. Only 1,000 people. And then last week, today is Friday, so a week ago today, they actually lifted the nightclub ban. They lifted the gathering bans. You still have to wear masks in public. I don't know if it's mandatory, but everyone still is. Again, there's a heightened awareness. But now everything's back to normal, more normal than usual. And they're opening everything up. And they never really shut down. They never had to close the economy. They never had to do any of that because they were really on top of that. So one success story. I don't think Taiwan foresaw the shutting down of international travel to this extent. I don't think they really thought it was going to be a pandemic like this, of this nature, where the majority would be outside of Asia. The majority of the cases and the deaths and everything would just be outside of Asia, because it's not really happened before. Well, it has in Europe and the plagues and stuff, but yeah, I mean, this basically just left Taiwan, everywhere else is burning. And Taiwan's just kind of watching everything go by right now. Like, we're okay, but what are you guys doing? So, yeah. So, thank you for watching. I hope this helps some people with any ideas, or just gives you an update of what's going on in different places around the world with no news commentary per se. And that I hope everyone is safe and stays healthy and stays safe and healthy, and we can all get back to some kind of normal soon. But again, Taiwan, the reason there's so few cases is because they really were ready for it. They clamped down and they did a lot of things. They were always ahead of the curve, never behind it. Unfortunately, a lot of other countries are behind the curve. So hopefully everyone starts getting caught up and getting on top of that and whack those moles, man. So thank you for watching. Thank you, and stay safe.